So thank you everyone joining this new series of webinars. This will be the first, and my understanding is that those will be then released into the public domain. So the ambition here is to give an overview of what it is, the Gatekeeper project at this moment, as we see it at month number 10. So I would start right away because I have a few things I want to share with you. First thing is that in our vision, the Gatekeeper project, and I am the responsible for the pilot site, pilot cluster. The whole project is organized into three main pilots, where there is three main clusters, where actually one is focusing on the technological aspects and the technological platform. Another is mainly focusing on the business side of the project, how whatever we will deploy will enter into the real world. And the third is the one that I have the privilege to coordinate, which is regarding the pilot sites themselves. So in my cluster, in the cluster I serve as coordinator, we look after the clinical sites and the social intervention, which are in the remit of the Gatekeeper project. And now, in this context, our vision is that the Gatekeeper large-scale pilot will be actually a federation of multi-center longitudinal cohort studies, demonstrating the effectiveness and the cost-effectiveness of key enabling technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data, and Internet of Things for the prevention of adverse events and the management of health in later life. Well, each and every of those words would probably deserve long discussion, but the key points, I think it's important that we remark them. This will be a federation because, as you will see in the next slide, this project is fairly ambitious in terms of number of patients, number of European regions, number of use cases that we aim at deploying over the span time of the project. And therefore, there will be some heterogeneity that will not allow us to run this as a one big pilot, which would be also out of the scope of these particular calls. But rather, we want to federate a series of harmonized interventions, which will have in common many things, clearly also the key enabling technologies, but we run autonomously also in harmony with all the other, with many things which will be harmonized with all the other under the facilitation of the Gatekeeper project. This therefore will be a federation of multi-center longitudinal cohort studies, because all the studies that we aim at deploying at each reference use case pilot site will be a longitudinal observational cohort study. Therefore, each use case protocol, which obviously is now going to be approved by the local ethical committee, will assure the maximal possible quality of the study, while providing also a pragmatic solution for scaling up Gatekeeper technologies in this heterogeneous ecosystem. We should never forget that Europe is not the delegate for health, so there is not one Ministry of Health in Europe, but this remains into the remit of national member states, and in many of those within the remit of regional governments, as is the case of Spain, Germany, Italy, and many others. Therefore, it would be not possible to adopt the same model for scaling up Gatekeeper technologies all over Europe, but we will need to respect those local differences, which in our opinion are the main reason why Europe is such a rich and interesting continent and place to live and grow up in. So the fact that we will federate things going on at regional level in different places in Europe, it's our vision. That's the way forward, in our opinion, to introduce key enabling technologies in the remit of healthcare in Europe. And technological solutions and business model will respect intrinsic differences which characterize partner regions, reference sites, and the communities they oversee in their own parish. publish. So we don't see at all this as a limit, but rather an opportunity to do better. And we know exactly the European ecosystem when it comes to healthcare. And therefore, we aim at leveraging on this deep knowledge in order to facilitate the uptake of the technology that we will deploy, which we hope will be cost-effective and effective. Now, the objectives of the project are to define, manage, and execute large-scale pilot activities in different pilot sites. You will see in a second what do we mean by different pilot sites, and to establish and consolidate different reference use cases through Europe. This is important. In this project, our clinical partners or our partners in charge of social interventions, they're not just one local unit such as an hospital or a local trust, but it's a complete ecosystem. It's a reference site as defined by the European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging, which means that all our partners, clinical partners, they don't come just with the clinical knowledge, but they come with their local healthcare authorities and their local execution of this project. And obviously, the third objective is to enable the deployment of digital solutions for early detection and intervention and supporting the risk stratification models that we have identified when we started writing this proposal and in the first 10 months of this project now. Again, part two of the objectives, we aim at defining a new paradigm for trialing, design, and innovative Internet of Things, which will result in a generation of novel real-world data that we will collect using state-of-the-art and innovative methods for real-world evidence generation in order to improve continuously the health and social services in Europe, leveraging on feedback and co-creating with local communities which know better than we can imagine the real needs of the local senior population. We have the ambition to open our reference use cases and pilots through the very powerful instrument of open calls, which has been introduced a few years ago in the remit of the Horizon 2020, which will allow other members of this very rich and positive environment, which is the space of healthcare in Europe, to join our project. We have budget for 1.5 million in order to open our partnership to novel pilots, both reference use case and technology and services providers that will like to join our journey. And we will welcome them and they will be fully integrated in our activities. We aim at issuing the first calls in the forthcoming months. So if you're interested to that, please keep an eye on the website and register yourself for getting news and updates from the projects, and follow us on our social media in Twitter and LinkedIn at least. And when I mentioned it before, reference use cases, that's what I mean. We have 7 different use cases, which you can aggregate in different manners. We like to do that according to the level of complexity, which characterize those use cases, which obviously is also a proxy for the level of severity of the patients that they target. So the use case number 1 is probably the one which has the lower complexity, and those target population have also the lower severity in terms of healthcare, of health conditions, and therefore healthcare demand. And this will mainly focusing this population in the order of 65 years old, which are still in good health, but they are at risk of decline in terms of cognitive, physical motion, and we have to prevent the onset of frailty or delay as much as possible the onset of frail conditions, which otherwise would severely hinder their quality of life with huge cost for the society, unsustainable cost. We don't care the fact that the cost is huge. We care that the cost has to be sustainable for the society, because otherwise you compromise the whole healthcare services in the region and in the nation, and therefore in Europe. And then we have a second level of use cases, which are those that we defined as moderate complexity. And those targets now patients. If the one I mentioned before were citizens, they are now patients because they suffer from at least one chronic condition. But this chronic condition is still in a phase in which it's under control. So it can be a mild hypertension, it can be a mild COPD or diabetic conditions, or the risk of stroke, or multimorbidity and need of polymedications, which are still into this domain of mild conditions. Now, they have a condition, they suffer from a chronic disease, at least one, so they cannot be brought back to the condition in which they are held, because by definition of chronic conditions, it means you cannot heal the condition or the disease. But what you can do is to manage this condition, and they can live for a very long time in a very good health, high quality of life, huge independency, and therefore with the lower possible demand for the local healthcare and social services. We like to say that for this level of intervention, Gatekeeper look after the people, not the intervention, because, well, also the intervention, but mainly the people, because here the point is to keep those patients stable and healthy and independent for as long as possible. The next level, those are not different diseases, are the same as the one we mentioned above. Therefore, we use this plus. So this is the use case 2, but plus. So now we have COPD patients which are in much worse condition, and probably they get in and out from the hospital because they require continuous hospitalization or interaction with the healthcare service. But still, there is something we can do here, because we can make sure that they don't come back to the hospital too often, and that they are compliant with the therapy they are given, they keep active, they keep physical and social interaction in a way that they can maintain their condition even if it is worse, but reducing the burden of their disease on the local healthcare service while keeping as high as possible their quality of life. We know it's not easy, but we believe it's possible. Together with COPD, we consider Parkinsonian patients, which by definition are probably every time in this second level. But then we have a 5+ and a 7+, which respectively reflect congestive heart failure and multimorbidity requiring polymedication, but for more severe patients. And this parameter we use is meant to reflect the fact that the wider portion of population is probably in this state. So Europe has a very, I would say, very high mean age when it comes to citizens if you compare with other regions in the world. But the majority of them, they are in a very good condition, good shape, high education level, so you can discuss with them good management program, and probably with little intervention, such as a small app or a very little intervention, you can really achieve that. While the more you go up in this pyramid, the less are the numbers, but the more severe are the conditions of the patients. Therefore, their demand of healthcare services is more complicated. So for those in the level 3, we envisage the use of more advanced technologies such as Internet of Things, wearable sensors, for a more pervasive, although never invasive, monitoring over time. Okay. The other thing which we have adopted in this project is the so-called value journal. Our final ambition is the value for the patient, and we want to achieve that in a very systematic manner. We like to say that, well, we wrote in the project that we have 5 phases to face. The first one is the takeoff, using this parallel with an airplane, which has to depart, you fly, and then disembark the passenger somewhere. So we are now in the takeoff phase. We are getting ready. We are boarding. We are checking in. and we are making sure that all our pilot sites are on the same page and ready to start. Then there will be the departure, and this is when we will start recruiting our patient. We will start activating all the pilots, which our ambition is that this will happen by the end of this year. And then our cruise will start. Our real journey will be there. So we will together, over a period of 2.5 years, deploy the services that I started introducing above, with the technology that I have already mentioned, and there will be other webinars specifically targeting those aspects. And then there will be at some point a descended phase when we will approach to our final destination, and this is when we will like to really measure the impact of our project. Obviously, we have started now to collect the information so that once we will be in the phase 4, we will be able to prove the effectiveness and the impact of and measure and therefore communicate the impact of our project to the whole world. And then there will be the landing, and that's where our technology or part of it, our services or some of them will be spin out in the real world, because our ambition is to leave a tangible result of this huge investment that the European Commission has made in this project, which we feel really the responsibility for. This is a multi-millionaire project, 24 million euro investment, which we really feel the responsibility. And as I have on the next slide, the idea is to recruit at least 40,000 patients all over Europe. And I must say, we can do that. We feel we can do that. And recently, other pilots have joined from Asia. One from Hong Kong, one from Singapore, and one from Taiwan, because they consider really valuable what we are doing. They want to join. They will bring their own experience into the Gatekeeper project, and we will share with them the lesson learned, because whatever we do now in Europe is going to be relevant for places like Taiwan or Singapore, where actually the population is going up in terms of ages as well. And it will be as inclusive as we can also with other regions in the world. Therefore, this is the minimum, 40,000 patients at least in Europe, but our target now is already gone up to 50,000 because the friends from Asia have been decided to join, demonstrating also the trust towards the Gatekeeper idea, vision, and team, which is important too. What are those reference use cases being deployed? Well, we have 8 different regions, from the UK to Germany to Poland to Italy, Greece, Cyprus, and Spain. And within those nations, some specific regions, because in any of those regions, nations, the healthcare services are provided at regional level. And the things that will be done in those different nations and regions will not be the same. So the combination of the 7 use cases and the 8 regions will generate a matrix of up to 7 per 3, 20 and more different use cases that will have many things in common, but also peculiarities that we would like to take into account. And I have a few slides on that to describe all the pilots. So I will not enter in details now because there would not even be time, but you will find those information on the website where actually you can deepen more. And if you are from any of those regions, feel free to reach out, keep in contact, because the vision of the project is that we will be as inclusive as we can along the life of this wonderful project. So we have the Aragon region in Spain, which is one of the pilots, the Basque Country, again in Spain, the Attica and Central Greece as a pilot site in Greece, Milton Keynes in the UK, Lodz in Poland, Regione Puglia in Italy, and the Saxony as a region in Germany. And what are those regions doing? Well, the first use case will be focusing on machine learning methods for predicting exacerbations and avoid the rehospitalization of patients suffering from COPD. We know this is one of the main problems with those patients. reducing the number of rehospitalization, because these, in the same time, increase patient quality of life and reduce the burden of their condition on their local healthcare services. I don't know why this is popping up and down. Please go up. Okay, doesn't matter. And then the other use case that I mentioned, the number 3, is focusing on diabetic patients. And the ambition here is to deploy predictive models leveraging on previous experience. This is an innovation action, so we will not reinvent the wheel. And all the partners, more than 42 partners, because there are the open calls, they are all very experienced scientists, clinicians, and people with technical background from Europe and beyond. So they will bring what they have already learned to do, what they have already started deploying, but in this complex ecosystem that with today's webinar, I am starting to describe to the public. And now this diabetic use case will be deployed in the Basque Country, in Attica, in Puglia. And now you start understanding what do I mean by federation of multicentric studies, because the way in which the healthcare interventions work in Puglia are slightly different by the way it works in Attica, which is again slightly different by the way it works in the Basque Country. So having one multicentric study, would that be possible? I'm not saying it's not possible, but the result would have been the efficacy. While we target the effectiveness, which is the efficacy in real world, is what happens once the trial is gone. And you really want to see what is the real impact on the local healthcare system and the local population in need of support. And that's the reason why we prefer to federate multicentric observational studies rather than imposing or proposing one multicentric study with the same design across the different regions. Because in this way, we probably lose some canonical intended evidence, but indeed we gain a step forward the real world. And we are closer to what it will be the condition once the project will be gone, because all the wonderful things are emanation of human being, therefore they have a start, a maturity, and an end. The next use case regards Parkinson. This will be mainly deployed and only deployed in the Basque Country, unless other proposals will come through the open calls. And here the idea is to use a combination of wearable sensors and smart computing in order to alert clinicians that the patient is doing something which is potentially risky or not expected, and therefore trigger an intervention in order to protect the patient, the family, and the ecosystem in which patient and the technology is deployed. And then the reference use case number 5, I'm set predicting readmission and decompensation in patients suffering from congestive heart failure. Heart failure is a complicated condition in which the heart is now losing the fitness which had when it was much younger. Is due to several conditions, but affected by the aging itself. So it's not a disease you can really treat, but you can slow down the deterioration and you can try to recover part of the functionality of the heart in different way. But our ambition here is to deploy multi-sensor monitoring in order to really keep under control the congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure patients, they also have several severities, as defined by the New York Heart Association scale. And the most severe ones, they really get in and out from the hospital. And this really limits their quality of life, the one of the whole family, and obviously has a big impact on the local sustainability of healthcare services. Because what we need to think, in Europe, all the healthcare services are provided by the public health, differently, for instance, from the state. So there is no distinction between healthcare system and healthcare service. It's all provided with the taxpayer budget. And every time we invest in one direction, for instance, managing heart failure, since the budget is limited, it's every time limited, it can be big or low, but it's every time limited, we are taking this money from something else. So you have to pay attention, because if you design an intervention for congestive heart failure, probably you don't directly see it, but you're taking off budget from something else, which could be pediatric, which could be maternal care. So it's important that we contain the cost so that we can satisfy the need of the whole population living in this region. Now, starting from that, our ambition is, again, to predict what it is known as decompensation. So the patient enters now in a stage in which is less stable and requires intervention, which can be medical, which can be drug intervention, which may require some invasive active implantable devices or surgeries, which obviously comes with a huge cost and every time with a further deterioration of patient quality of life. Number 6, as use case, is primary and secondary intervention for stroke prevention. And here the idea, again, in the Basque Country, is to use technology, which is a combination of sensors and apps, in order to early warn, generate alarms to early warn the patient themselves and the ecosystem which is in charge of the patient, to inform them that they are entering in a stage in which one of those events is now more probable than it was before. And obviously this will trigger intervention, which will have several levels of complication of complexity according to the condition of the specific patient. Reference case number 7 is a multi-chronic elderly patient management, including polymedications. And this will be deployed basically in all the pilot sites because it comes with the age, and many of those senior citizens, they suffer from more than one condition. This will trigger the need for polymedication, and a lot of problems come from polymedication. First of all, maintaining the same, the expected therapy, it's difficult by itself. Drugs can interact in an odd way and unpredictable manner. We know that polymedication is a risk factor for falls, which are a drama in later life. So there are all sorts of complications. And how are we trying to target this? Well, there are several levels of technologies. There will be some robotic intervention that Samsung and Open University will deploy in the UK. And there will be some smart pill dispensers that other partners, such as Poland, are considering to deploy to their own pilots. I say considering because, as we'll show later, we are in this stage of the pilot in which we are all applying for ethical approvals in our local ethical committee boards. And obviously, feedback may come, and what it is now, our ambition may be then obviously tweeted and tailored according to the recommendation that we will get from the local ethical committees. So it's in this stage, the whole project. And there we are. Sorry to anticipate the slides. That's exactly where we are today. This is month number 10, because we started in October last year. We are more or less on time, and I say more or less because obviously the COVID had a severe impact also on our project, but much less than probably it has done on other projects because we were still into the takeoff stage. So we were still landing and preparing our pilots and technology. Therefore, we were not yet recruiting patients, which otherwise would have been severely affected. Still, some delay has come because many ethical committees gave priority to COVID-related proposals and put on hold whatever else. But that's just an example. And the fact that I'm now at home, it's still because being in the UK, we are avoiding contact and office work for whenever it is possible. So obviously, this has introduced a lot of complications, which, by the way, have been very well managed within the project itself. So we are more or less where we should be. We envisage a delay of 2 or 3 months, but that's not dramatic compared to the long life of the project and the situation in which other projects are in this moment. So we are there. We are optimistic. There has been some disruption, but the response of the team has been great as usual. And regarding COVID, we are now thinking to introduce a novel reference use case specifically for COVID. Actually, the project reaction to the COVID is actually dual, and that's what we decided in the pilot cluster and has been adopted by the Wole project. We have 2 levels of intervention. One that we call it at zero cost. So all the 7 pilots that I introduced before will introduce some COVID relevant measures. So whatever it is the underlying disease they are tackling, they will add to that some detection of symptoms which are relevant for the onset detection of COVID. So this will include, for instance, loss of smell, loss of taste, fever, and all the symptoms that now we learned are important in order to early identify the onset of COVID, the disease induced by the SARS virus. While there would be a completely novel reference use case, which will give the opportunity to all the reference sites to bring within the remit of Gatekeeper the initiatives they are taking for protecting their senior citizens from COVID. So there will be prevention, management, and therapy, if everyone is proposing that, also with the open calls. And the fact that we are adding now an additional reference use case will allow the open calls also to go in this direction. And we expect, obviously, given the circumstances, that this will be an important part of the project, not only our project. This is one of the 4 large-scale pilot, which in this moment the Commission is overseeing, and the Commission themselves, they're doing a great job in harmonizing the work that those 4 pilots are doing in this direction as well. And this is probably the first response of the European Commission to COVID, because changing an ongoing project is easier than issuing a call, understanding who will win the call, given the budget, and wait for them to start. So this is the first response of the European Commission to COVID in terms of mHealth. 4 pilots, we are one of the bigger in terms of budget and number of patients, but there are other 3 which are as good as we are. And this will be the means through which the European Commission is responding now to COVID, while the other proposals will come to the life. Now, I have a set of slides on each and every pilot, but I will really go through that very quickly because you will find this material online. And for instance, in Aragon, we have 700 towns with 1,300,000 inhabitants. 20% of this is over 65, so it's potentially in the remit of this project. But because of what I mentioned before, you saw and you had an idea of the particular pilots that Aragon as a region will deploy through the Gatekeeper. They have long experience of project, they have long experience of mHealth, they are in a very good position because their social and healthcare services are very well integrated, and in later life this is really important. So those Aragon certainly will be giving great contribution to the whole project as anyone else on board. Few more details about their target users, the solution employed, but I don't want to take too long today. You can find those information on our website. Visit it if you have not done yet that. And then we have the Basque Country, again, very well positioned for the level of integration they have among social and healthcare services, the great competence they have also when it comes to assessing the impact of an intervention and health technology assessment, long experience in mHealth for later life. Again, a huge percentage of population which is above 65, even more than 30% as a projection over 10, 15 years. But now we are around the 20% as in the rest of the Spain. In this case, there will be 2 main deployment sites, Kronik-Gun and Asakideza. And they will all target, as you can see in this slide, different use cases. Number 1, number 7, number 3, number 5, 4, and 6, a different level of complexity. So a lot of work also in the Basque Country, but we feel completely secure because we know very well the Basque friends, and we are sure they are doing a great job. Cyprus. In Cyprus, mainly they are focusing on cancer patients and including in that also the management of the end of life. Here also there are 2 deployment sites, 2 associations, Amen and the Daycare Center, which oversees a huge number of patients all over the island, which is again very peculiar, small ecosystem, great integration among healthcare services and technology. Cyprus has given great contribution also from the scholarly point of view to the domain of mHealth and the health, I think to Batikis, I think to many friends and great academics which have really given great contribution to this remit. So they're also doing a great job, and they will do a lot of good work in the remit of this project. Greece, in this case, we have also different regions, different use cases, aging population with the metabolic syndrome, therefore trying to intervene before the onset of diabetes. So metabolic syndrome is a fairly complicated situation to manage, and the studies in this direction are a bit more recent than the ones on diabetes, but they have long experience in that. And that's where probably with an app and coaching, you can prevent a huge part of the population to enter the next stage of the pathology, which actually will require much more complicated intervention. But then they're involved also in the use case number 3, hypertension, diabetic patients, and they have, as you can see here, a smaller number, 150 versus the 1,000, which I mentioned before. But obviously in this case, given the severity of the patient, the complexity of the reaction will be higher. So here we envisage the use of wearable sensors apart from the app, and the artificial intelligence. Greece will give great contribution in that, consistently with their history and huge expertise, especially from the University of Ioannina and Patras, which they have in this field. Milton Keynes is probably among the different pilots the one which has a more social rather than clinical intervention, although in this phase of life, whatever is social is also clinical implication. So they are all focused on the reference use case number 1, and we are now also planning a reference use case also contribution in the number 7, polypharmacy, where they will deploy robots in order to support the elderly in the facing these complicated therapeutical situations. And also for the COVID, we are planning together interventions for this trial population. Puglia, Italy. So this is the whole region Puglia, where we have an ecosystem in which there are 2 regional agencies that they oversee clinical interventions and social interventions, together with the great support from great hospitals, which are of national and international relevance, with a very good technical team, which is leading, apart from supporting many of the aspects that I have mentioned so far. And they also are involved in several use cases, and their ambition is to collect a significant number of patients, especially in the space of diabetes. But again, you will find details on that on the slides on the website, so I don't want to spend too much of your time on that. Saxony pilot Saxony is also a very interesting region in terms of how advanced their social and healthcare interventions are with respect to other regions in Europe, and they will mainly focus on mental health management of senior citizens. Those are probably younger than the one you have seen in the other slides, but those are citizens which suffer from mental health problems such as bipolar disturbs and similar, which may result in violence, which may affect the subject and the relative. So here the main ambition, but I don't want to be reductive, read the material on the website because it's much more complicated than that, is to prevent the onset of phases which may result in violence and therefore impact the quality of life of patient and their family. I didn't want to be too superficial on that, but we really have a very sophisticated project. And I want to spend a few words on the way we will assess this very complex intervention. So we are now understanding and harmonizing the different interventions, and we are now in the stage in which all our pilots are submitting ethical approval, demand for ethical approval in their local ethical committees. And that's in order really to deploy those services that we hope will help to solve some of the problems that I have been mentioning before. I have already anticipated some of that. We have to measure the impact. We need to measure the resources we expend. We need to control the expenditure in healthcare, because also due to aging, which, don't take me wrong, it's to me a blessing. It's not a problem, it's an opportunity. But now we need to take care of those senior citizens. and be sure that their quality of life is maintained as high as possible, but in a sustainable manner, because we spend public money and we have a limited budget. And with this limited budget, we need to look after elderly, but also all the other patients, including pediatric, maternal care, which are as important for us as geriatric medicine. So we need to be aware of what we do. And how are we going to do that? Well, our ambition is to really measure the value that our investment will generate. So if you spend €1 in this technology or in those services, what is the gaining in terms of quality of life? What are the benefits that you will generate to the population in your parish? And how are we going to do that? Well, we have a clear vision about that. And implementing this vision will not be easy, but we have an excellent team also from this point of view. We will do our assessment in a pervasive manner and having in mind 3 different levels. A micro level, which is the one of use cases, one of the 7+1 COVID that I have introduced before, and that at each of those use cases, we can do cost effectiveness, cost efficacy analysis in using real world data. Why we can do that? Because now the population is homogeneous. They have the same disease. We can use scale which are consistent for the disease, which can be diabetic patient, congestive heart failure, hypertension, or any of the other which I mentioned before. And we will also measure the cost of that using reference cost, so that if anyone else want to read this and adapt to their own regions, they can easily do that. And we are starting planning some budget impact analysis, which is under consideration. The previous one was the minimum we have to do, as it was also required by the European Commission, and we use the MAFAPE tool that we know very well. I myself, Giuseppe Figo, have been involved into the evaluation of the tool during the design stage, and now Open Evidence is in charge of the maintenance and the continuous update and the dissemination and education regarding this tool in Europe, which we believe it's a great tool, which we believe will be more and more important for European grants, and we will be fully supportive on the further development of this tool. When it comes to pilot sites, now we have seen in some pilot sites we have more than one use case. I would say in all of them. And now you cannot just measure the efficacy as you were doing before. So you need the meso level, which is the one of the utility. So the way we measure the quality of life. And now measuring the quality of life doesn't matter if you were doing an intervention for diabetic patient or hypertensive patient. Your target is to increase the quality of life of, let's say, 10%, 5%, 20%, whatever is your target. And you can still measure that using the quality of life and the utility, also when the patients are very heterogeneous and different one from the other. And finally, we have the macro level. We cannot really detail how this will be at some point, if it will be the platform or the services or some of the technology or some of the services that people can use through the platform, because it's too early to make predictions on that. We have a vision, we have an ambition, but we are still starting, and probably we will have better ideas to communicate on that in 1 year, 6 months, 1 year time also on this aspect. But overall, we will pull together the things that we will be able to measure at meso and micro level by using the state-of-the-art methods and tools for doing that, which probably will be meta-analysis or meta-analysis, or we will enter into the domain of real-world data and real-world evidence. Discussion is still going on, but the first two will be done and will be aggregated in order to have also the assessment of the whole impact at macro level. I'm sorry if I took a little bit more than I was wishing for, so I just want to thank all the attendees for their wonderful attention, and I will be happy to take a few questions now, if any is coming from the floor. Thank you.